You can now get a 30-day trial to experience The Athletic for free. Visit the link in the description below to try it now.
Hello! After nearly a decade in charge, Ed Woodward is stepping down as Executive Vice Chairman of Manchester United to be replaced by Richard Arnold in the coming days. And today I'm joined by Ollie Kay and Matt Slater to discuss his legacy. But before we do that, here's a very quick informational video on what he was before he joined the football club.
In 2005, Ed Woodward was a senior investment banker at JP Morgan, working in mergers and acquisitions. And it was in this role that he advised Malcolm Glazer on his takeover of Manchester United, which eventually, with the Glazer family impressed with Woodward's work, would see him offered a role at the club. By 2007, he'd risen to become the commercial and media lead, and he would become an architect of one of the most prolific commercial strategies in global football. He would then be appointed to the club's board in 2008, and in 2012, following the departure of David Gill, he assumed day-to-day responsibility for the running of Manchester United as its executive vice chairman.
So, Ollie, the first thing I want to find out about Ed Woodward is, as it relates to his legacy, there's some confusion about the footballing structure at Manchester United, and there has been throughout the near decade that he's been there. What impact is that going to have on his legacy, do you think?
I think it will shape his legacy enormously. I think if we're talking about his tenure as a whole, I think you have to say that it's reflected by confusion, a clouded vision, slightly sort of chaotic lurch from one idea and one manager and one transfer policy to another, or transfer strategy to another. And I think that just reflects that he never really got to grips with what the football operation was meant to be. I think he spent the first 4 or 5 years slightly starstruck, whether it was by managers, by agents, by players.
Well, Matt, all lead executives of football clubs are to some extent representatives of the owners, but with Woodward and the Glazers, there's something a bit more visceral about it, isn't there?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the relationship is very, very close. I mean, he's almost synonymous with the Glazer ownership. And I think if we think about Woodward, we really have to sort of think about the Glazer ownership. So let's take it back almost to 2005 when they took over. Yeah. Very controversial circumstances, we know, a leveraged buyout, they loaded lots of debt on the club. Lots of fans immediately upset about that. Unprecedented, certainly in British football. But the club they were taking over was streets ahead of anyone in the UK and arguably Europe and the world, on and off the pitch. So he took over a commercial powerhouse and a footballing success story.
Well, because the narrative, as you say, is that whatever he did on the footballing side of it, he was a commercial genius. He's doubled the commercial income over his entire tenure, which is an impressive thing. We know a lot about how he did that. I'd like you to explain that a little bit more, but I find that the idea interesting that maybe he's given a bit too much credit for that.
I think he's given way too much credit for that.
I agree.
Way too much credit for that. I mean, I think that was almost always the defence. Oh, it's fine, but he's really good commercially. I'm not saying he was terrible commercially. I'm saying that there are really good commercial people at most big clubs these days. And you have to look at the growth of the entire sport. You have to look at his relative position. As I say, United were streets ahead. They used to top the Deloitte money list in terms of revenue every year. And this goes right back to Manchester United, the brand. Back to the 50s, the 60s, that stadium, the Busby Babes, Munich. This is all part of the story. The fact that they were the biggest and best team at the critical moment when the Premier League went global.
Yeah.
They got a bit lucky. If it was 5-10 years before, it would be Liverpool.
Yeah.
It could have been, if it was 5-10 years after, it could have been Arsenal or Chelsea.
Sure.
But it was United, and they were already the biggest team in the country. That is the team that the Glazers bought. That is the team. That is the business that Woodward inherited. The world's most famous, arguably, them, Real Madrid, Barca, Bayern. Those clubs, the world's most famous football brand. He didn't mess it up. I'll give him that.
Sure.
He had an interesting idea.
He changed the strategy.
He had an interesting idea.
Yeah.
So the thinking in sort of, certainly, say European football at the time, and this is almost like kind of sports marketing 101. They borrowed it from FIFA and the IOC. You'd have 6 or 7 partners, big partners. You'd have a car brand, you'd have a drink, you'd have a financial services. You didn't want to get things too messy, too crowded. You wanted to give these sponsors a chance to breathe. You wanted to give them what they all want, access. They all want access and engagement. These are the words they always use. but they really just wanted to be made
Sure.
to feel important, and
Yeah.
you weren't diluting their brands as well.
Yeah.
Whether it was his idea or he heard it and thought it was a good idea,
Spotted it happening in
spotted it
the
happening
other
elsewhere,
markets, right?
he certainly ran with it.
Yeah.
No, we're not going to do that. We're so big, we're going to basically put a billboard everywhere. And it's a kind of an American idea. If you go along to, let's say, minor league baseball teams or what have you, there'll be a sticker on everything.
Sure.
We're going to sell everything here. And it's the noodles and mattress strategy that for a while Woodward again became synonymous with, and it was a stick to beat him with.
Noodles and mattress meaning they had a noodle partner, they had a mattress partner.
In Vietnam,
Right.
in Thailand.
Sure.
We're not just going to have one credit card. We're going to have a credit card in 10 different markets.
Sure.
We're not going to have one energy drink. We're going to have 10 energy drinks. This, I think, is the when people think about Woodward's United, it's that they became this sales operation. And yes, it was successful, and yes, it has been copied. But are they, relatively speaking, any better off than when he took over? And the answer is emphatically no.
Well, they're certainly not as far ahead as
No,
they were.
exactly. Everyone's commercial
Yep.
revenue has doubled and tripled. Liverpool, Man City, Barca, Real, no, they've gone past United's. Woodward made a terrible mistake a few years ago. In an investor's call, one of the few times that we were talking about him enjoying the role, he very rarely went on the record. But he had to go on the record 4 times a year. He had to speak to the investors because they were listed on the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
And often those were the few times you would hear someone ask him a couple of questions about the business. It would be some analyst from a bank in the States and say, and I remember, I think it was 2018. I think Mourinho was there. And I don't think they were doing that well. Maybe it was pre-Mourinho, I can't remember. They weren't doing that well. And there was a question from an American banker saying, look, we've just lost, or you've just lost, and it doesn't look good. And so Woodward sort of cut him short and said, I'm going to speak honestly and candidly. What we do on the football pitch doesn't really matter in terms of what we do off, or what we can do off it. Banker to banker, we're fine.
Sure.
Don't worry about the results, we're fine.
Yeah.
3-4 years on, he's wrong. You cannot decouple the football club from the business.
Yeah. I mean, that very succinctly is the kind of rotting element in the middle of the heart of this situation. I'm going to head over to the board now to illustrate this a little bit more, Matt, because our design team have kindly put together this lovely graphic here, which is trophies, a comparison between Manchester United and Manchester City. Manchester United in the red, of course, and Manchester City in the blue. Now, it starts here in 2012-13 when Sir Alex Ferguson's last team won the Premier League. And as you can see, as the graph goes along, there's a sea of blue and not very much red. This is bad, isn't it? This is not a good thing. So here we can see the total transfer spend during the Woodward years. In total, this is £1.3 billion. You can see the yellow here is the net spend, meaning that they made a little bit of that back. But Manchester United have never really been a selling club, and perhaps that's something we can talk about. On the next slide, we can see this is broken down by season, by player, and by amount. So we should discount the first 2012-13 season. The signings here of Van Persie, Kagawa and Butner were players that were brought in by Ferguson and David Gill beforehand. But everything from 2013-14 onwards with Fellaini and Mata, this is in the Woodward era. And this is what we're going to spend the next few minutes talking about. And I'm going to bring in my good friend, JJ Bull, to help me do that. Yeah, well, here we go, JJ. Now, at the top is all the names of the players that have been signed by Manchester United during the Woodward era.
Yes.
And what I'd like you to help me do here is put them in bad, okay, or good. One of the
Which you
three.
spell as Goddle.
Goddle, yes, exactly. It starts from here, Fellaini, Mata, Di Maria. Now, off you go, Fellaini.
Fellaini. Well, see, Fellaini, you'd get like sort of a bad rap because it's sort of like a comedy buy because he's not the sort of elite player that you're thinking you're going to buy. But he was very functional, especially with David Moyes' team.
Sure.
I don't think he can go anywhere else apart from okay, right in the middle of it.
No, that's fine.
Maybe even leaning here.
Maybe. Would you say, Ollie, that, Fellaini perhaps got a bad rap partly because of the circumstances surrounding the transfer?
To me, he represented the sort of stagnation of Manchester United at the time. But in terms of his individual performance, I think he was, I'd certainly put him in that middle category.
All right, well, Juan Mata, he's still there now, right? Loads of experience.
Do you think they're all going to go in okay?
They might do, yeah. Di Maria is a very hit or miss player. Either he's amazing or he just disappears from the game. I don't think he was ever really suited to the Premier League because you have to be always best. You have to always be consistent and best.
Well, also, based on what we are judging here being the transfer, I think it has to go, not even in okay stroke bad. Ollie, I think it has to go in bad.
Oh, I would agree. And he's one that I thought when they signed him, wow, what a player. What a great signing to have made.
Man of the match in the Champions League final the season just before, right?
Yeah, but they never seemed to know how they were going to use him. It came out very quickly that Van Gaal liked the idea of using him in midfield. And his best form for Real Madrid, best form for PSG, has been in a wide position, often cutting in from the right. It seemed to me that it was a familiar case of Manchester United knowing there were going to be players cleared out of Real Madrid that summer, deciding they would get whatever was on the table. I think, was it Ozil? Was he the same? Somewhat? No, Ozil had been slightly earlier when he'd gone to Arsenal, but it was the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Players out of favour. They decided they would go for the big name, and I don't think they had a clue how they were going to use him. He ended up playing some games up front, and it just didn't work. It didn't settle. I think in the right team, if he'd been at Manchester City in 2015, 16, 17, under Guardiola, I think he would have done brilliantly, as long as he settled off the pitch.
Yeah.
But I think the struggles on the pitch compounded the struggles off the pitch, and I'd say it was a really bad buy in the end.
Falcao, JJ.
Yes.
Bad?
I think Falcao didn't work for United. It's probably going to go in between okay and bad, or maybe in towards here.
Ollie K, can it go in between okay or bad, or is it just bad?
Oh God, I think it's definitely bad. I think it's one of the worst deals they did, which is saying something. I mean, it's a loan deal, so people will say, well, it was a no risk, but it was a very, very expensive loan deal. I remember speaking to people on that transfer deadline day, and people at Manchester City, and they were saying, yeah, we were interested, but not at that price. The wages were enormous. The loan fee was enormous, and beyond the first couple of games, he just didn't look up to Premier League pace at all. He'd come back from injury, was struggling. You wouldn't have said at that time that he would go on to have the resurgence that he had post United and post Chelsea. But I'd say in terms of Manchester United, definitely in a bad category for me.
Martial's a really good point in this, right? Buying players on the up. He was a golden boy when they bought him. So huge potential. They thought he could be a superstar, future Ballon d'Or winner. I think he has to go in bad. Like, it costs an enormous amount of money. He hasn't fulfilled at all what the potential they expected of him.
I guess one of the upsides is, apart from appearances made and stuff, I think that deal was structured in such a way as it would go up to a huge amount as and when he fulfilled the potential that he never fulfilled. So I actually have no idea how much he cost in the end, because it was a huge sort of strange structure to that one.
Yeah. It was one where they were that summer. They were looking around. They'd been knocked back for a few players. I think was it the summer that they'd got knocked back by Pedro, who obviously went to Chelsea, and they couldn't agree a deal with Barcelona. And then they were looking at Sadio Mane, which would have been a really good deal with hindsight. And they decided not to go for him. They decided to go for Martial. And I remember the briefings out of the club at that time were very much about what a coup this was, and what a really railing against the idea that it was a panic buy, and it was a panic buy. There's no way they would have considered paying that amount of money for him at the start of that summer. They'd got knockbacks, and they ended up desperate with a few days of transfer window remaining. And that, to me, with Woodward, a lot of the big deals happened towards the end of the window. Di Maria, Falcao, Martial, Fellaini, and they all looked very reactive.
Tell you what, let me do the next four, because I've got a good idea. Yeah, bad, bad.
Yeah, but that made so much sense.
It did make sense, but let's put him here. Pogba though, Pogba's a difficult one. Ollie, what do you think? Where do we put Pogba?
I think it's got to go down as one of the worst deals in the Premier League era.
Is it going bad?
If they lose him on a free at the end of this season, having signed him on a world record deal, and got a handful of really good performances, but a lot of really bad performances over the past 6 years. A lot of time at least half the time he's been disillusioned and wanting a way out. And what was it, summer of 2018 when it first came out that he wanted to move?
Yeah.
Summer of 2019, he said it himself, and they've just clung on to it.
I feel like we're deciding at the moment the legacy's not good, but let's carry on, and we'll smash through a few more of these, JJ.
Yeah.
How would you judge Lukaku though? Because
I think it didn't work for him. Awful lot of money. I think the expectations of him were maybe too high, and this is what United have. So you're just in trouble, right? But then if you don't deliver, that's
also
what happens to you.
we're going to come and talk about managers, but bought by one manager, then immediately trying to adapt to a manager with a totally different style of play.
And when he left, he was too static up front, but he's been used mostly as a sort of target man. He never has been.
Yeah.
He's a sort of poacher or a guy who can run really quick out behind the defence. Was used incorrectly, but hadn't played for a team as really as big as United before that point. So that's probably why.
Does anyone want to say anything about Sanchez?
Just that it was a classic example, and this is what we've talked about before, of wanting to make that statement. Manchester City were in for him. They were trying to agree a deal with Arsenal and agree a deal with him because his contract was nearly up. And Manchester United came along and blew him out of the water.
Yeah, it was treated as a kind of victory, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, a massive PR sort of celebration, and the video of him playing "Glory, Glory, Man United" on the piano, which was I felt like and ended up feeling like it should have been Les Dawson playing the piano. One for the kids there, but it was a statement signing. I at the time referred to it in the hallowed pages of the Times as willy waving, and I think it was just an attempt to flex the muscles and show we can hijack this deal that Manchester City are doing.
Yeah.
Man City were streets ahead in the league. They wanted him, and then United went in, blew everybody out the window, caused disharmony in their own dressing room because the wages were so big. And were left with a player that they didn't really need because they had Martial, they had Rashford, who played in that sort of loose left-sided role.
And I think with all these, look at the picture we're forming here. This isn't great.
I think it's some of those are flattering, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for someone to go into good. I'm hoping a bit later.
Sort of pizza slices and all the good stuff is on. This
one's very
it's a
pepperoni
real
heavy.
mess. It's got jumbled up in the box. But look, in the financial fair play era, this many bad, expensive mistakes kills you.
Oh yeah.
Kills you.
There was a good one.
One good one.
Yeah, there he goes, obviously.
Great. Okay, who's next?
Rafa Varane, great transfer.
But one thing that has been really striking in the Woodward years is that there's often been a real sense of certainty and satisfaction, self-satisfaction, that this is going to work out. We might have made mistakes before, but this is a great deal. This is a great appointment. They were like that with Van Gaal. There was a real sort of Emperor's New Clothes element to that perhaps
Not dissimilar in a way to the Ragnick deal.
Until sort of midway through the second season, suddenly there was a sense of panic within United that it wasn't working out. But weeks earlier, Woodward had been describing him as a genius, and why would we need Pep Guardiola? We've got Louis van Gaal, who's a genius. So it's all reactive every step of the way. I think
Van Gaal then goes to Mourinho, which is an entirely different style of play. Then goes to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, again an entirely different style of play. Ragnick is, in terms of his tactical preferences, we've made a video that's gone out on this channel fairly recently about that. But again, it's a little bit of a jump from what Solskjaer was doing. You used the word reactive there. I think you've also used it as well today, Matt. It seems like a big theme as part of his tenure.
And statement signings, marquee signings, and that desperation to sort of flex the muscles. I think the Ronaldo deal certainly fits into that category. I think a lot of people would say it was a no-lose situation. I think there has been a downside to it that has been apparent. I think if Solskjaer could turn the clock back, would he have done it? Would he say that maybe it sort of destabilised the team a little bit after the progress of last season? I don't know. He might be so loyal to the Manchester United ethos, the Cristiano Ronaldo cult that he says, yes, he's glad he did it. Yes, he's glad he spent a few weeks working with him. But I don't think it did him any favours.
When we look to the future, Matt, Richard Arnold is stepping in to take over. Who is Richard Arnold?
Who is he? Well, he's cut from the same cloth, to be honest, in many ways. He's an old university pal of Woodward. They went to Bristol University together. He's an accountant by trade, came through Price Waterhouse, was a success in Saudi Arabia. He was involved in the privatisation of one of their telephone companies, I think. But he's worked at United a long time. And he's come through that sales team that Woodward built.
Yeah.
So again, you know, you can often tell a lot about companies. And if we weren't talking about football for a minute, if we just took a look at companies, you know, what's important to the company? Where do they think the future and the growth of the business is? You can tell by how they recruit internally, which is the hot department.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I'm not saying they would have picked a footballer to be the chief executive, but they've chosen someone from the sales team. They've chosen someone from that noodles and mattress gang. Fine. I think what would be interesting with Arnold is if, having looked at where Woodward has struggled, it's the lessons he learns, that sort of institutional memory sort of stuff. Like, do I go and get some genuine football brains around them? Do I delegate that side of the business better? He was taking over a club that really was either going to carry on at this very high performing level, or it was going to fall away. And we know that sort of dynasties come and go, right? So that was a bit hard. And he was representing this unpopular regime, and he was, I think he was confident, he was overconfident. You know, this idea that I didn't need help because I'm bright and smart and I'm going to learn on the job. He got that wrong. He was guilty of an element of hubris, but I do think there was an element of bad luck that whoever took over under those circumstances was going to fail. And he did fail. So Arnold now is the guy after the guy. You know, he's the next guy.
Sure.
So he does have a chance to reset things. They are still Man Bloody United, right? They are still really famous. They wear red. They have this incredible backstory. They've got fans all around the globe. They've got some good players. He can turn this around, but he's going to have to learn the lessons from the Ed Woodward era. He can't carry on like that.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic brings you the best sports journalism in the world in a personalised experience, connecting you with the stories and teams that you care about the most. There's coverage of 13 sports, plus direct access to world-class journalists through live Q&As, discussions and podcasts. Not to mention, it's all ad-free. And you can try it now for free for 30 days by clicking the link in the description.